On April 24, 2024, Joe Biden signed a law that threatens to ban the short-form video app TikTok. TikTok is wildly popular in the US with over 150 million active users. This means that almost half of the US population regularly uses the app. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. ByteDance operates a similar app in China called Douyin. TikTok and Douyin are almost identical in their functionality, but Douyin is available in China while TikTok is only available outside of China. Due to deteriorating relations between the US and China, the Biden administration now believes that TikTok is a national security threat. They claim that the Chinese government could potentially access the personal data of American TikTok users. Under the terms of the newly signed law, ByteDance has 9 months to sell TikTok to a US company, otherwise face a ban in US app stores. The 9-month deadline ends in January of 2025, conveniently falling after this year's presidential election. Despite having signed a law to ban TikTok, the Biden campaign maintains an official TikTok account and still plans to use TikTok influencers as a key part of their campaign strategy. TikTok has said they have no intention of complying with this new law, which they view as unconstitutional. They will instead bring a legal challenge, and their fate will be ultimately decided in court. In this video, we'll look at why the US government wants to ban TikTok, why, despite this, Biden himself is still using TikTok, and the most important question, will TikTok actually be banned? The idea of banning TikTok is not new. In July of 2020, the Trump administration ordered that TikTok be sold to a US company or face a nationwide ban. The Trump administration had 2 concerns with the app. Firstly, they said TikTok collects large amounts of data from its users. The Chinese government could theoretically compel TikTok's parent company ByteDance to hand over personal data of US TikTok users. The Trump administration claimed that the Chinese government could use this data to blackmail people and conduct corporate espionage. Secondly, the Chinese government could compel ByteDance to manipulate TikTok's algorithms to boost content favorable to the Chinese government and throttle content critical of the Chinese government. So are these concerns valid? Could TikTok really be used as an espionage weapon? Let's start with what data TikTok collects. According to the Trump administration, TikTok collects the user's age, username and password, language, and email or phone number. Obviously, they collect this data as it is required to create an account. Secondly, they collect your name, social media account information, and profile image. Thirdly, they know what you post on TikTok and what comments you make on other people's TikTok posts. They know your payment information if you make any in-app purchases, such as buying virtual items to give to a live streamer. They know which TikTok influencers you follow. They know about your communication preferences, such as whether you allow TikTok to send you push notifications. And finally, TikTok sometimes sends surveys to its users, which may ask for your gender, age, likeness, and preferences. Basically, TikTok collects information about what you do with the TikTok app. Literally every social media app in the world collects at least this much data. The Trump administration claimed that the Chinese government could use this data to blackmail people. You'd have to be watching some really spicy TikTok videos for your watch history to constitute blackmail material. The second concern is that China would manipulate the TikTok algorithm to spread propaganda. It's undoubtedly true that the Chinese government enforces very strict internet censorship policies domestically. ByteDance almost certainly manipulates the algorithm of the Chinese Douyin app to comply with government censorship. That's why ByteDance created TikTok as a separate app, available only outside of China. This way, TikTok does not need to comply with China's censorship rules. The Trump administration provided no evidence that the Chinese government manipulates TikTok's content algorithms. Yet the possibility that this could theoretically happen was used to justify calling TikTok a national security threat. Coincidentally, in June of 2020, just 1 month prior to Trump announcing the TikTok ban, a group of anti-Trump TikTok influencers conspired to sabotage a Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The rally was free to attend, but you needed to reserve your seat online in advance. A bunch of teenage TikTok users signed up for the rally with no intention of attending. This filled up the reservations and prevented many actual Trump supporters from signing up. It may just be a coincidence, but maybe this could have explained Trump's dislike of TikTok. Trump signed an executive order requiring ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company within 90 days, otherwise be banned in the US. This almost happened. ByteDance was in advanced discussions with Microsoft for a potential sale. But before any deal could be signed, the Chinese government contacted ByteDance and told them they would not allow the sale. They viewed TikTok as owning valuable artificial intelligence technology, which was developed primarily by the parent company ByteDance within China. They would not allow ByteDance to sell this intellectual property to a foreign company. In a desperate attempt to avoid being banned, TikTok came to a tentative deal with a software giant Oracle. TikTok would be spun off as an independent entity, but ByteDance would retain a controlling stake. Oracle would take a minority stake. Oracle would be in charge of hosting all of TikTok's data at data centers within the US. With Oracle being an American company, the Chinese government would have no way to access this data. This deal was meant to address the concerns of both the US and Chinese governments. Trump was not satisfied. He rejected this proposal in September of 2020, and TikTok would be banned from the US app stores within days. Right before the ban was to take effect, a federal judge filed a preliminary injunction blocking the ban. From a legal perspective, the main problem was that Congress did not authorize a TikTok ban. Trump decided to do it unilaterally. The Trump administration argued that they had this authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. The IEEPA allows the president to outlaw foreign entities from transacting in any property subject to jurisdiction of the United States. Basically, if the president decides that a foreign entity poses a national security concern, they can prevent it from doing business in the US. TikTok is a foreign entity doing business in the United States. Trump argued that he had the authority to prevent it from doing business in the United States. However, the IEEPA specifically does not apply to personal communication, which does not involve the transfer of anything of value. It also does not cover information or informational materials, including but not limited to publications, films, posters, artworks, and newswire feeds. So why is this the case? Why does IEEPA not apply to information media? When the IEEPA was first passed in 1977, it did give the president the power to ban foreign news media. In 1981, the Reagan administration used this power to seize thousands of magazines being shipped from Cuba to the US. Many of these magazines contained left-wing political content. Many viewed this as Reagan trying to censor left-wing political media. These Cuban magazines weren't really a national security threat. They were just something that Reagan didn't like. In response, Congress revised the IEEPA to explicitly prevent it from being used to censor information media. The Trump administration provided no evidence that the Chinese government ever collected personal data from US TikTok users, or that it ever used TikTok to disseminate propaganda. It only argued that this could happen. But even if this was happening, the IEEPA still wouldn't give Trump the authority to ban TikTok. A hypothetical transmission of data between TikTok users and the Chinese government, even if used for intelligence gathering or propaganda, would still constitute personal communication, which is specifically exempted from the IEEPA. The judge's decision was only a preliminary injunction. If the government wanted to press the issue further, they could have sought a trial. But within a few months, Joe Biden was inaugurated. He decided to end the litigation. This was not because he was against the idea of banning TikTok. Instead, the Biden administration saw that Trump's legal arguments were dubious. They were extremely unlikely to prevail in a trial. If the government really wanted to ban TikTok, they would need new legal authority. The IEEPA wasn't going to cut it. Even though TikTok won the preliminary injunction, they moved forward with their plan to move all of their US data to Oracle data centers. They reportedly spent $1.5 billion to do this. They hoped that this would alleviate the national security concerns and prevent future attempts at a TikTok ban. In this, they were sorely mistaken. In May of 2023, the state of Montana passed a law banning TikTok within the state. The rationale for the ban was similar to Trump's attempted ban in 2020. They claimed that TikTok's Chinese ownership created a national security threat. In November of 2023, a judge overruled the ban before it could take effect. Unlike Trump's executive order, the Montana TikTok ban was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor. There's no doubt that the law authorizes the governor to ban TikTok. The question is whether or not the law is constitutional. TikTok sued the state of Montana, arguing that the ban infringes on the First Amendment as it restricts the ability of Montana residents to communicate. Montana argued that the TikTok ban does not restrict free speech. People are free to say whatever they want, they just can't say it on TikTok. The judge did not buy Montana's argument. The TikTok ban would deprive the 300,000 Montana residents who use TikTok of their preferred means of speech. Banning TikTok restricts the time, place, and manner that a person can speak in a public format. If somebody is a TikTok influencer, their speech on TikTok is obviously protected by the First Amendment. If TikTok is banned, they can still speak on other platforms, but their ability to speak is restricted. Maybe that influencer can reach a larger audience on TikTok than they could on other social media platforms. Thus, banning TikTok restricts that influencer's speech, thereby violating their First Amendment rights. With that being said, the government is allowed to enact laws that restrict speech, but only if the laws advance important government interests unrelated to the suppression of free speech and do not burden substantially more speech than necessary to further those interests. Montana claimed that they have an interest in protecting Montana consumers from espionage by the Chinese government. Fair enough. That is a state interest unrelated to the suppression of free speech. The problem is, Montana provided no evidence that the Chinese government is using TikTok for espionage. Therefore, there is no evidence that the TikTok ban would protect consumers. In the words of the judge, quote, "Banning TikTok outright to support a factually unsupported interest is a clear example of a regulation that burdens more speech than is necessary," unquote. To justify the TikTok ban, Montana must show that it will alleviate Chinese espionage in a material way. The judge pointed out that other social media companies, including Meta, collect similar data as TikTok. It is known that Meta sells its users' data to undisclosed third parties. There are dozens, if not hundreds of data brokers that purchase personal data, including from social media companies. These data brokers have far more data on US citizens than TikTok. All large intelligence agencies, including Chinese intelligence agencies, are assumed to purchase data from these brokers. The Chinese government likely already has far more data on US citizens than anything they could get from TikTok. Therefore, even if the Chinese government is using TikTok for espionage, banning TikTok would have little to no impact because the Chinese intelligence agencies have ample alternative data sources. Thus, Montana's TikTok ban does not serve any state interest, and thus its infringement on free speech cannot be justified. In April of 2024, Joe Biden signed yet another TikTok ban. Technically, TikTok could avoid being banned if ByteDance sells it to a US company. But we know the Chinese government won't allow this, so effectively it's a ban. The ban is scheduled to go into effect in January of 2025. The federal government's legal position is slightly stronger than Montana's, but not by much. One of the arguments against Montana was that they did not have a sufficient state interest in banning TikTok. The federal government can argue as an interest in foreign policy matters. They may attempt to frame the TikTok ban as part of their broader foreign policy strategy related to China. With that being said, the federal government will still face an uphill battle in court. They can persuasively argue that they have a state interest in preventing Chinese espionage, but they still need to prove that banning TikTok will materially alleviate this harm. They also need to prove that the TikTok ban does not burden substantially more speech than necessary to further this interest. Remember that TikTok has spent $1.5 billion to transfer all of its US user data to Oracle data centers located in the US. TikTok claims that ByteDance, and by extension the Chinese government, cannot access this data. Critics argue that TikTok and Oracle can't be trusted. Even so, the government could instead pass a law mandating that government personnel be allowed to oversee the Oracle data centers to make sure they're secure. This would alleviate the alleged risk of Chinese espionage without violating the First Amendment rights of TikTok users. Therefore, an outright TikTok ban almost certainly places an unnecessary and unjustifiable burden on protected speech. The US government's hatred of TikTok is very difficult to understand. Almost all US politicians seem convinced that TikTok is a tool of the Chinese Communist Party, yet none of them are able to produce any evidence. When I was doing research for this video, I came across perhaps the single most bizarre and deranged article I've ever read in my life. It's this article in The Guardian titled, quote, "TikTok is part of China's cognitive warfare campaign," unquote, written by Nita Farahani. I've linked it in the description if you want to read it for yourself. She claims the Chinese government is engaging in a cognitive warfare campaign against the US, and TikTok is part of this warfare. The Chinese government uses TikTok to brainwash the American public. So what's her evidence of this? The only evidence she provides is one personal anecdote. She was giving a talk at the World Economic Forum. TikTok influencers posted a portion of her speech on TikTok. She claims the clip was taken out of context. Basically, some TikTok influencer posted a video that Farahani didn't like. Therefore, she concludes that TikTok is part of the Chinese government's cognitive warfare campaign. Further on in the article, she also claims the Chinese government is developing brain control weaponry. To be clear, there is no such thing as brain control weaponry. This is science fiction. It does not exist. The point is, a lot of discourse around TikTok is based on paranoia and alarmism, with zero real-world evidence. In this paranoid frenzy, the government is trying to ban TikTok, thereby trampling the First Amendment rights of over 100 million Americans who use the app. Ironically, Biden himself uses TikTok as a key pillar of his campaign strategy. Here's a picture of President Biden meeting with a bunch of TikTok influencers in the White House. The Biden campaign itself has a TikTok account, and to this day is actively posting videos. This likely explains why the TikTok ban is scheduled for January 2025, conveniently after the presidential election. If TikTok really represents a national security threat, why is Biden using it, and by extension encouraging his supporters to use it? Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about the TikTok ban? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.